You didn't forego the doctrine, the clarity of doctrine. But what I heard you say and what I really appreciate about your ethos is doctrine isn't enough. You know, it's not enough just to sort of give us a document with 50 footnotes, but you're really advocating for a pastoral praxis. So maybe speak a little bit into that. Like how can we as Christians develop pastoral praxis for persons struggling with sexual identity issues?
Yeah, well, the title of my chapter, Reverent Curiosity, why the church needs to listen to gender dysphoria, might strike some people as a compromise of church teaching. Oh, here we go. We're letting dysphoria lead the way here. It's like, no, 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 no. What we're doing here is, okay, where's this coming from? And a bit of it I lifted from the ideas of Jay Stringer, who's an evangelical counselor and therapist. And he wrote a book called Unwanted, in which he focuses on people struggling with pornography addiction. And what he pointed out is that the church is really going about it all wrong. It just in terms of just sin management, just white knuckling it, getting sobriety and a streak away from that stuff. But they pointed out like the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's human connection. And so we've got to look, what are the deeper unmet needs behind this pornography addiction that might be driving this compulsion? And so if we're just simply counting days of how much we've got the streak going and just kind of just saying no to it, we're going to be almost like cutting the leaves off a weed instead of getting down into the root system. And we've got to disturb that in a good sense of just going down, okay, what is going on here? What is it that I'm aching for that I think transitioning is going to afford me? And I think in particular of a high school boy I met in Texas, and he said he was trans, and we sat down, had a great conversation. I said, well, tell me about your life. And he said, well, I got 2 older sisters, 2 younger sisters. And it's like, they can do no wrong. My parents love them. They fawn over them. They're affectionate to them. But I'm like the black sheep of the family. I got straight A's. I'm on the swim team, but nothing I do is ever good enough for my parents. And I said, well, do you think if you were born a girl, you would have been loved the way your sisters are loved? And he's like, well, I know that I would have been. And it's like, okay, well, here we go. Now we're listening to the dysphoria. And his ache isn't to go on puberty blockers. Like his ache is to be loved. And he sees a female identity as a pathway to that affirmation. Now, that's his story. Everybody's story is unique, but that's the key. The church needs more than a mouth. The church needs ears to kind of listen to these people's stories and accompany them and walk with them instead of just what you see on YouTube, watch this conservative speaker just crush and humiliate this trans activist in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It's just clickbait. That doesn't work in real life when you actually love someone who wrestles with this. Like, let me just disprove your bad anthropology. Okay, you're all better. Aren't we good now? No, we're not good.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think a lot of people are probably really intimidated by the topic in general. And so they're thinking, well, how do I even approach this? So even what you've just presented by just be a listening ear to people. Like, what is that like? Thank you for sharing that with me. I mean, like simple things, right? Clothing the naked just by simply affirming people revealing themselves, especially in these very sensitive areas of sexual identity. So I really appreciate that.
Many of them feel obviously invisible in the church. I mean, they could be sitting right next to you in the pew, and that dad sitting next to you just looks like a big old manly dad with his wife and kids. But little do you know that guy's been wrestling with gender dysphoria, since like adolescence, and marriage is a bit of a costume for him. But behind closed doors, he's really having some big wrestling. And if you're having coffee and donuts after mass, and you crack some joke about all this gender nonsense, he's likely to feel quite invisible. Like, man, if this is where the guys are at church, I better keep this mum, keep my little secret behind closed doors. And so we've got to be real careful in the way that we're speaking about this. We might have a caricature of what we think people look like who might be wrestling with this, and have a bit more reverence towards the subject. And then, if God willing, that someone's able to share this with us, that the deepest ache of the human person is really to be seen and loved. And for those who feel completely invisible and erased, it's no wonder why that they struggle with high rates of suicidality and depression. And obviously, it's not because those transphobic religious bigots. It's because there's a lot of other issues going on beneath the surface, and more often than not, gender dysphoria is a symptom of these deeper psychological issues that simply aren't going to get resolved if they get ignored or they just get put on cross-sex hormones.